The harsh fluorescent lighting of the Winnipeg General Hospital emergency ward buzzed with a relentless, erratic frequency. Jessie stood near the nursing station, his damp clothes heavy against his skin, his fluffy hair drying in chaotic spikes from the aquatic center. He listened to the ER physician with mounting horror, his brown eyes locked onto the clinical data being delivered. "The preliminary toxicology screening is back," the doctor said quietly, scanning a blue digital tablet. "Your friend isn't suffering from a natural psychotic break. Her system is flooded with a synthetic hallucinogen, specifically a highly concentrated chemical variant of LSD. Jessie felt the air in his lungs turn to ice. The scattered, terrifying variables of the past 48 hours suddenly snapped into a flawless equation. The destroyed apartment in Gimli, the pulverized pills on the floor, the bizarre, damage-free break-in at the Winnipeg pharmacy. None of it was random. It was a targeted supply chain sabotage. He thanked the doctor and pivoted, scanning the waiting area until he spotted the police officer who had followed the ambulance. Jessie approached the man, seamlessly adopting the fluid cadence required to communicate his urgency to the median population. "Officer, I need to amend the incident report," Jessie stated, his voice vibrating with absolute certainty. "Kira didn't have a spontaneous mental collapse. She was deliberately poisoned." The officer frowned, reaching for a notepad. "Poisoned? Son, people don't just slip acid into someone's water at a hotel pool." "It didn't happen at the pool," Jessie corrected quickly. "It happened at the pharmacave, the break-in you were investigating yesterday morning. You told me nothing was stolen, that the registers were untouched. They didn't break in to extract inventory. They introduced a hostile variable. They swapped Kira's prescribed citalopram with a hallucinogen manufactured to look exactly like her standard medication." The officer stopped writing, deeply skeptical. "You're talking about a highly coordinated tampering operation. Who would go to that kind of trouble?" "My ex-girlfriend, Darcy," Jessie said, the name tasting like ash. "She has the financial resources and a profound, malicious desire to prove Kira is unfit for society. She tracked us from Gimli. She broke into our apartment to destroy Kira's initial supply, forcing us to refill it at that specific pharmacy." "Do you have any physical proof?" the officer asked gently. "Security footage of this Darcy, a confession." "Not yet," Jessie admitted, his jaw clenching. "But the toxicology report confirms the chemical breach. You need to pull the pharmacy's surveillance tapes immediately." The officer sighed. "I'll flag the detectives, but without concrete evidence linking your ex to the break-in, we can't arrest her. Focus on your friend for now." Jessie nodded, recognizing the bureaucratic wall. He navigated the sterile corridors until he reached room 412. He pushed the heavy wooden door open and stepped inside. The room was dim, illuminated only by the faint, rhythmic glow of the cardiac monitor. Kira lay motionless under a bleached hospital blanket. The heavy sedatives had completely suppressed her motor functions, leaving her pale against the starched pillows. The geometric predictability of the metal bed rails was the only environmental comfort the room offered. Jessie pulled a vinyl guest chair to the side of the bed. He sat down, maintaining a respectful spatial buffer, but positioned himself perfectly within her direct line of sight. "The external perimeter is secure," Jessie whispered to her sleeping form, shifting back into their shared precise language. "Your chemical baseline was sabotaged by a hostile variable. The auditory and visual corruption was not a failure of your internal processing. It was an introduced toxin. You are completely safe. I am your unyielding constant." He reached out, his hand hovering over hers for a fraction of a second, before gently resting his palm against her knuckles, providing a steady physical pressure. The quiet isolation was interrupted 10 minutes later. The door clicked open, and a woman in a sharp navy blazer stepped inside. She wore a laminated hospital badge identifying her as a psychiatric therapist. "You must be Jessie," she said softly, approaching the bed. "I'm Dr. Eris. I was called in to assess Kira following her episode in the aquatic center." "She was chemically poisoned," Jessie stated plainly, his median population voice firm. "The ER physician has the updated toxicology report." "I've seen the report," Dr. Eris acknowledged, her expression guarded. "And while the hallucinogen explains the acute overload, we must address her underlying condition. Given her autism diagnosis, her ability to process trauma of this magnitude is severely compromised." Jessie bristled, though he kept his posture relaxed. Her response to an unconsented chemical breach was entirely logical. Her sensory parameters were dismantled. "Be that as it may," Dr. Eris continued smoothly, "hospital protocol is very strict regarding public psychotic episodes. Kira is going to require extensive psychological evaluation. We cannot clear her to return to her normal societal routines. She certainly won't be able to go back to her job. The workplace variables are too unpredictable for someone in her current fragile state." Jessie didn't argue the medical bureaucracy. Instead, he simply restructured the logistical reality. "She doesn't need to return to work immediately. I will assume her operational position. I will take over her shifts at the diner until she is completely recalibrated." Dr. Eris blinked, momentarily thrown off by his absolute devotion. "You're going to work her shifts?" "Yes," Jessie confirmed, his brown eyes locking onto the therapist. "Her employment vector remains secure. Her income remains stable. She will have whatever time and structural support she needs to process this data corruption. I will support her through whatever therapeutic protocols she requires, but she will not lose her place in the world because of this." The therapist offered a tight, conceding nod. "I'll note your support system in her file. We will reconvene when she wakes up." Dr. Eris exited the room. Jessie immediately pulled his cell phone from his pocket and selected the number for Robin's diner. It rang 3 times before the steady voice answered. "Robin's, Henderson speaking." "Mrs. Henderson, it's Jessie," he said, keeping his voice low to preserve the acoustic calm. "Jessie, is everything all right? We have encountered a catastrophic external variable," Jessie explained. "Darcy tracked us. She orchestrated a targeted sabotage of Kira's daily medication. Kira ingested a synthetic hallucinogen and suffered a severe sensory collapse. She is currently hospitalized and sedated." A heavy, terrifying silence hung on the line. When Mrs. Henderson finally spoke, her voice was steel. "Is she safe now?" "Yes, I am with her. But the hospital is mandating a prolonged psychological recovery period. She cannot return to her station. I am requesting authorization to fulfill her employment obligations. I will take her shifts. Her station needs to remain exactly as she left it, so she has a mathematically predictable coordinate to return to." "Done," Mrs. Henderson said instantly. "Her station stays hers. You cover the hours. And Jessie, when you find the proof you need to nail that blonde menace to the wall, you let me know." "I will," Jessie promised. He ended the call, turning his attention back to Kira, ready to anchor her shattered universe. The steady, rhythmic ping of the cardiac monitor was the first variable to successfully integrate into Kira's rebooting consciousness. She blinked against the harsh, sterile lighting of the hospital ceiling. The heavy midazolam fog still coated her neurological pathways, making her physical limbs feel detached and sluggish. She turned her head by a fraction of an inch, her hazel eyes immediately locating Jessie. He was sitting in the vinyl chair beside her bed, his posture rigid and highly alert, functioning as a silent sentinel. "Jessie," Kira whispered, her voice raspy and devoid of its usual rhythmic cadence. "My internal data logs are highly corrupted. The memory files from the aquatic center present a catastrophic system failure. I feel like a monster." Jessie leaned forward, instantly entering her visual perimeter. Your baseline was compromised by an unconsented chemical breach, he said softly, perfectly matching her clinical precision. You experienced a severe sensory hijack. A monster is a fictional variable with malicious intent. You possessed zero malicious intent. You were surviving a hostile environment. Kira swallowed hard, staring at the bleached cotton blanket. The panic attack registered as the worst systemic overload of my entire recorded history. The auditory and visual processing completely shattered. Did I breach the physical safety of others? Did I hurt you? Negative, Jessie assured her, maintaining direct, unwavering eye contact. Your physical responses were erratic, but you did not harm me, nor did you damage any median individuals in the vicinity. The only structural damage was isolated to your own physical coordinates. Kira looked down at her left arm. A thick layer of white medical gauze was wrapped tightly around her forearm. Underneath the bandage, a deep, persistent itch radiated across her epidermis. She remembered clawing at her own skin, trying to physically escape the terrifying colors that had burned her retinas. My epidermal layer is intensely irritated, she noted, gingerly flexing her fingers. Will the hotel administration permanently restrict my access to the aquatic center due to my erratic presentation? The thermal regulation of the heated water is a highly necessary protocol. There is zero logical reason for them to bar you from the pool, Jessie replied smoothly. The incident was a medical emergency triggered by an external toxin, not a behavioral infraction. The parameters for your return remain open. Before Kira could process this reassurance, the heavy wooden door to the room swung open. The controlled acoustic environment was instantly ruptured by the arrival of Jessie's brother, Caleb, and his wife, Sarah. Caleb wore his usual polished demeanor, his eyes sweeping over the room with clinical detachment. "Hey, man," Caleb said, his voice carrying the standard, loud cadence of the median population. "We came as soon as we heard. How is she holding up?" Jessie immediately shifted his linguistic register, standing up to block Caleb's direct path to the bed. "She's stabilizing. The sedatives are wearing off, but she needs a highly controlled acoustic environment right now." Caleb offered a patronizing, sympathetic smile. "Of course. Look, Jessie, I know this is terrifying. I've already started making some calls. I can find the absolute best psychiatric specialist in the city to help her process the trauma of this panic attack. She needs professional intervention to handle an unprovoked breakdown like this." Jessie's jaw tightened, his brown eyes narrowing. "It wasn't an unprovoked breakdown, Caleb. It didn't come from nowhere. I already told you, Darcy somehow switched her daily citalopram with a highly concentrated synthetic LSD. She was poisoned." Caleb sighed heavily, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Jessie, look, I saw the toxicology report. I know LSD was a factor, but you have to be realistic here. The drug might have been a catalyst, but when someone with her specific neurological profile has a panic attack over nothing, the feeling never really goes away. The sensory trigger becomes permanently embedded. The LSD just opened a door that was already there." Kira shifted uncomfortably under the sheets. The median noise was creating a secondary friction in her chest. "Jessie," she interjected, her precise tone cutting through the escalating tension. "My internal thermal regulation and emotional stability require a specific stabilizing variable. I require a London Fog beverage from the Tim Hortons franchise." Jessie immediately turned his back on Caleb, locking his focus back onto Kira. "I understand. I will acquire the exact item to restore your baseline. I will return shortly." He walked past his brother and sister-in-law without another word, slipping out of the room and into the chaotic, fluorescent-lit corridors of the hospital. He navigated the median population with practiced ease, his mind entirely focused on Kira's requested variable. He took the elevator down to the main lobby, moving toward the glowing red signage of the coffee kiosk near the main entrance. As he crossed the crowded waiting area, a flash of blonde hair caught his peripheral vision. Jessie froze. Sitting on a vinyl bench, clutching a designer purse, was Darcy. She looked up, her eyes locking onto his. She jumped to her feet, her expression shifting into a carefully rehearsed mask of deep concern. The gossip network in their old social circles was fast, but her physical presence here was a direct, malicious intrusion. "Jessie," Darcy said, stepping into his path. She reached out, her hand hovering as if to touch his arm. "I heard what happened. It's all over the grapevine because of how small the town is. I had to come see if you were okay. Please, just give me 1 minute to talk to you." Jessie looked at her. He felt absolutely no residual attachment, no lingering sorrow, and certainly no warmth. He felt only the cold, unyielding need to protect his perimeter. "You have some guts," Jessie said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal register that made Darcy physically recoil. "Waiting for me here, in the hospital where Kira is fighting for her life." "Jessie, please, I just want a word." "Do not speak to me," Jessie interrupted, his tone as sharp as shattered glass. "Do not come near me, and do not ever come near her again." Darcy's eyes widened, genuine panic flashing beneath her practiced concern as she realized the absolute totality of his rejection. She opened her mouth to beg, to spin another lie, but Jessie didn't wait to hear it. He stepped around her, his shoulder brushing past hers without hesitation, and walked straight toward the coffee kiosk. He left her standing alone in the crowded waiting room, entirely deleted from his equation. The heavy wooden door clicked shut as Jessie stepped into the corridor, leaving an echoing silence in the sterile hospital room. Caleb stood at the foot of the bed, shifting his weight awkwardly and checking his watch, the very picture of median population discomfort. Sarah observed the rigid tension, holding Kira's shoulders against the bleached cotton pillows. She recognized the profound self-doubt clouding the younger woman's hazel eyes. "Caleb," Sarah said quietly, stepping forward to gently touch her husband's elbow. "Why don't you wait in the hallway? The girls need to talk." Caleb looked relieved, offering a quick nod before slipping out of the room. Sarah pulled the vinyl guest chair closer to the bed, offering Kira a soft, unhurried smile. She didn't crowd the spatial buffer, intuitively understanding the boundaries Jessie had so carefully maintained. My physical responses were entirely decoupled from my voluntary motor controls, Kira stated into the quiet room, her voice carrying a brittle, mechanical edge as she tried to quantify the trauma. "I have never felt so out of control before. My localized data processing failed completely." "It wasn't your fault, Kira," Sarah replied, keeping her tone warm and steady. "That chemical hijacked your system. Nobody would have been in control." Kira looked down at her bandaged forearm, where she had aggressively scratched her own epidermis. "I would never intentionally execute physical damage upon myself or others. The behavioral output from the aquatic center was intensely confusing. I am confused on why I would do that when my biological matrix does not possess self-harm protocols." Sarah leaned forward slightly, resting her hands in her lap. "You didn't generate those protocols. The poison did. I know you wouldn't hurt anyone, and you certainly wouldn't hurt yourself. It's just going to take a long time and a lot of patience for you to get completely back to normal." "My baseline is deeply compromised," Kira admitted, her fingers picking nervously at the geometric hem of the hospital blanket. Then, she voiced the variable that was causing the most severe internal friction. "I initiated a catastrophic meltdown sequence within Jessie's direct visual perimeter. My vocalizations were erratic, and my physical presentation was chaotic. The social data I have collected regarding median interactions suggests this should cause permanent repulsion. I feel embarrassed that I had a total meltdown in front of him." Sarah's expression softened into an expression of deep maternal empathy. "Kira, you don't need to be embarrassed, not with him." She reached into her purse and retrieved her smartphone, tapping the digital glass. "Jessie's love for you isn't based on you being perfect. It's like this old song, 'Nothing's gonna change my love for you.'" Sarah found the track and pressed play. The tinny speaker of the phone filled the sterile, fluorescent-lit room with the soulful, steady opening chords of the classic ballad. The rolling melody provided an unexpected mathematical rhythm that immediately contrasted with the erratic hum of the cardiac monitor. Kira fell silent, leaning back heavily and training her hazel eyes directly on the acoustic ceiling tiles. She let the structured verses and harmonized chorus wash over her sensory processors, staring at the empty white space above. She analyzed the auditory data, internalizing the unyielding promises in the lyrics and the predictable, comforting cadence of the instrumentation. It lacked the chaotic unpredictability she deeply feared. "The auditory profile," Kira whispered, a small, genuine smile relaxing the tight muscles in her jaw. "It matches his behavioral parameters perfectly. It sounds like him." "It does," Sarah agreed, turning the volume down just a fraction so it remained a gentle background constant. "He doesn't care if you broke down in front of him. He doesn't care if you embarrassed yourself. Jessie will always love you, exactly as you are." Out in the corridor, the rich, aromatic steam of Earl Grey tea and steamed milk curled from the top of the paper cup in Jessie's hand. He had successfully acquired the variable, pushing through the bustling median population with singular focus. His only priority was restoring Kira's equilibrium. As he approached the doorway of room 412, Jessie paused. Caleb was leaning against the peeling beige wallpaper of the corridor, staring blankly at a hospital bulletin board. "Why are you stationed out here in the hallway?" Jessie asked, seamlessly adopting the casual, median syntax required for his brother. "Is something wrong with the room?" Caleb pushed himself off the wall, offering a dry, knowing chuckle. "Sarah kicked me out. She said the girls needed to talk." Jessie frowned slightly, rapidly calculating the variables. Kira was in a highly fragile state, and exposing her to prolonged median social protocols without his firewall protection carried risks. "Should we stay out here, or should we go back in?" Caleb shoved his hands deep into his pockets. "I've been married for quite a few years now, Jess. I know the drill. Girls usually talk for about 15 minutes, and I can hear music playing through the door right now. The heavy lifting is done. We should probably go in." Jessie nodded, reaching for the handle and pushing the heavy wooden door open. The soft, fading notes of a pop ballad hung gently in the air. Sarah was sitting exactly where Jessie had left her, but the atmosphere in the room felt fundamentally restructured. The suffocating tension was gone. Kira's head was turned toward the door, and as her round hazel eyes locked onto Jessie, a bright, undeniable smile illuminated her face. Jessie felt his own chest physically lighten at the sight of her stabilization. He stepped fully into her line of sight, instantly reverting to their exact, shared clinical language. "I have acquired the requested London fog. The thermal properties are currently operating at your optimal preferred range." He moved to set the warm cardboard cup on the bedside table, taking care to align it precisely with the geometric edge of the plastic hospital tray. When he turned back, Kira was looking up at him with an expression of absolute, unshielded trust. "Jessie," Kira said softly, lifting her unbandaged hand from the bleached cotton sheets, "I would like to hold your hand." "Affirmative," Jessie replied without hesitation. He sat gently on the edge of the vinyl chair and reached out, wrapping his fingers securely around hers. He applied the exact amount of physical pressure she required, firm, steady, and grounding. Kira stared down at their connected hands, processing the visual contrast between his warm skin and the stark, sterile hospital environment. She absorbed the sensory feedback of his presence, feeling the absolute safety of his constructed perimeter locking back into place. Slowly, she looked back up to meet his big, brown eyes. "Can I kiss you?" Kira asked, her precise tone softening slightly. Jessie smiled, a warm ridge of pure affection pressing into his features. He leaned forward slowly, deliberately broadcasting his approach so she could seamlessly track his physical coordinates. He closed the spatial buffer and gently pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, entirely devoid of chaotic variables, functioning only as a perfect, verified transfer of respect and devotion. When he pulled back, ensuring he remained comfortably within her visual field, Kira's breathing had completely stabilized. The chaotic interference of the aquatic incident was gone, replaced by a mathematically flawless certainty. "You are my constant, Jessie," Kira whispered softly into the quiet room, her voice steady and absolute. "And I love you.